So Trump is doing his own thing, which has left Europe confused and worried. Their leaders are scrambling for solutions, and they're huddling in Paris today. It's been called an emergency informal meeting. The agenda? To discuss Ukraine's future, to chart a European strategy for the war, probably 3 years too late. Nonetheless, they're doing it. Heads of state from across Europe are attending, so is UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Before leaving for Paris, he made a major announcement. Starmer said he's willing to send British soldiers to Ukraine, not to fight Russia, but to enforce the peace. Like I said, any deal will require security guarantees, and that responsibility will fall on Europe. Keir Starmer says he's up to it. He's also looking to play the role of a mediator. Between whom? Europe and the United States. Starmer is slated to visit the White House later this month. He's hoping to give Europe's message to Trump. Well, it sounds good on paper, but Starmer's own ties with Trump are weak. He has clashed repeatedly with Trump's allies like Elon Musk, so it's not clear how he will mediate. For now, let's focus on the Paris meeting. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is attending, so is Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, NATO Chief Mark Rutte, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen. So all the big European powers are attending. The question is, can they arrive at a common strategy? In the past, such efforts have failed, but this one is a bit different because it's happening after a tumultuous week. First, Donald Trump spoke to Russian President Putin. Europe was completely blindsided by this. And then US Vice President J.D. Vance attacked Europe, in Europe. This happened at the Munich Security Conference. Vance simply unloaded on Europe. He said their biggest threat was not China or Russia, but the retreat of free speech.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Well, Europe is not used to this sort of attack, especially not from its most important ally. It seems to have set off alarm bells in Brussels. Hence the need for today's summit. Their first priority will be to decide on a plan for Ukraine. Do they boost military spending? Do they commit troops to, like Britain? Do they condemn talks behind their backs, or do they stick to diplomatic niceties? What should Europe do? That's what we need to watch out for. Officially, the position in Brussels is quite clear. A weaker Ukraine is bad news for Europe.
A failed Ukraine would weaken Europe, but it would also weaken the United States. It would intensify the challenges in the Indo-Pacific and threaten our shared interests. Because what we have seen is the authoritarians of this world are carefully watching whether there's any impunity if you invade your neighbor and violate international borders, or whether there are real deterrents.
Also, watch out for unity or the lack of it. Putin bet on that when he invaded Ukraine in 2022. Trump too is betting on that today. If major EU powers are united, they can mount a challenge. If not, there is little hope for them. But don't mistake this meeting for some selfless act towards Kiev, because it's also about self-preservation. Europe needs America's military protection. Until now, that was guaranteed, but President Donald Trump is ripping up the old playbook. He wants Europe to defend itself. Expect the leaders to address this concern too. And they mainly have two options now. One is to increase their military spending to convince Trump that Europe agrees with his philosophy, the philosophy of pitching in. The second is to go it alone. Zelensky pitched that idea over the weekend. He said Europe should have its own army. It's an idea that was previously supported by French President Macron. The French are clearly leading the way here. They're calling for creative solutions.
I'm not just talking about the threat posed by Russia today. I'm talking about all the threats that could threaten Europe if the authoritarian powers hear or there feel that Europe is helpless, that it is unable to defend itself. So we're going to have to make far greater creative efforts than we have to date. And we need to be prepared for this, because we will have to face difficult days, make complicated decisions, and perhaps even sacrifices that we did not expect until now if, indeed, this security is to be guaranteed.
Europe will also be watching the moves in Riyadh. They will be on the lookout for concessions from Trump. For example, what if he pulls back NATO deployments from Eastern Europe? What if he vows to end NATO expansionism? It wouldn't just impact Ukraine, it would impact Europe's security too. So this is a very important meeting for the EU, one that could shape their future and security. Let's see what the leaders can come up with. We're calling the show Vantage. We hope you like what we've put together for you. Touted as the minimum two-way defense from that video. India's neighbors were the first to send this special edition of Vantage live from the White House throughout the week. Yes, Hindu Mandir we're on our way to Tel Aviv. Pretty measure, but it's also the perfect way to drive.
I don't think that
Prime Minister of Bhutan, Sherin Tagwe. Welcome to
60% of the world's
office. Prime Minister Modi did the iron.
we were actually
How are you doing? How do you like? It's been 1 year since that meeting. Iron bars separate you from the outside. Out the vote efforts. Trump had, it says, and at $4.3 trillion. 300 billion by 2030. That's what we need to tackle climate change.